Okay, so I've been asked to chat about a tool that was developed during my master's time at University of New Brunswick. It was done in collaboration with Ghost Watershed Alliance and with the Alberta government. It's really neat time to be talking about this kind of stuff, because we're hearing this morning about all of these different derived data sets that you can get from LiDAR information, and there's so many different data sets that you can get. And it's what Gord was talking about too, where you have all of this information, but you don't have maybe the knowledge or the methodology to implement that knowledge on the landscape. So to try to build tools to help the managers and help people understand the different decisions that are out there to help make trade-off analysis. It's a very powerful thing. So I'm going to start by popping this graph up. I usually have this graph about halfway through my presentation, but I think it's important because about 2 weeks ago there was I don't know the exact name of the expo, but it was like a recreational expo here in Edmonton where all the new ATVs and all the new toys are being showcased, and it's this large room, and you walk around and you start seeing these like 3x where 3 people can sit side by side, and these go off into the wilderness and just go. And they weigh probably about 1,200 pounds, and those things come with trailer hitches, and they're not just carrying little trailers with their tent on the back anymore. There's people starting to make almost RV type tow-alongs. So interest in getting out into Alberta's wilderness is growing, and as you can see by the graph here, it's almost exponential. What this is showing is from 1990 a 25% increase in registrations, and if you correlate that with population growth, then that's the explosion in interest that we will get. So we need to try to manage for this now before it becomes a problem and we start incurring damage. So, as I said, as interest increases, managers will be under more pressure to provide access for people. The unfortunate part of this is that it takes people's time, it takes people's money, and the more time that you have to put into something, the more money it's going to cost you. So we need to try to help managers reduce their time, reduce the money that it costs to come up with viable options for this increase in interest in Alberta parks. So without these tools, without tools that can bring all this information together into knowledge, we're going to see a continued and ever expanding degradation to our environment, which is, I guess, is bad. So in order to start thinking about this and thinking about the information that we need to ask ourselves first is what is recreation in Alberta? What does recreation in Alberta mean to you? And it's a very, very difficult thing to say that recreation means the same for everybody. It doesn't. There's a whole lot of perspective out there. You could be 18 years old, you could be 50. You could be an ATV rider, you could be on a horseback, you could want to hike up a mountain. Recreation means so many different things. And so trying to account for all those different things is our first level of complication. Coupled with that is that recreation can occur anywhere, at any time, and in any condition. You could want to go for a nice hike on a very well-groomed trail, or you could want to get on your ATV and go bogging for a day. And these conditions are desirable, and people will find them if we don't control access. So each of the different types of activities that we can do, each of the different times that we can do it, they all have their different degrees of impact upon the environment. So in order to start building that information list, we need to start thinking of what is impacted. So there's a large list of things that are impacted. I only listed a few here. Alteration, destruction of streams and stream banks, disturbance-sensitive habitats, water-air pollution, running compaction. The list goes on. So when we start trying to consider all of these things, as I'm sure if you were here yesterday and this morning, then these are not easy problems. Each one of these considerations is vastly difficult to determine. So we need to start getting into the information to try to predict these things. And that's where LiDAR really starts to show its prowess. It's a grade above the provincial DEM, even 10-fold factor. So what that does, it allows confidence in the predictions. And without that confidence, you're not going to have faith in anything that you produce. So that's where LiDAR starts to really show its value. So there are a whole bunch of trail considerations out on the landscape. The type of trail that you want to create, slopes, the erosion from those slopes, any vegetation work that you might want to do. Do you want to send guys out with boots on the ground and chainsaws, or do you want to just try to blaze a path down a grassy knoll? Perspective. There's points of interest that you might want to get to. There's points of interest that you might not want to let people get to. These are all things that need consideration. So talking about LiDAR and the difference between the 30-meter digital elevation model, I put down 10 years, but then I was starting to think, I think it might be longer than 10 years ago. But that's why I put the little wiggly sign in front of the 10. Probably 15 to 20 by now, but anyhow, trying to derive any of those metrics with a 30-meter digital elevation model will produce results that you're just somewhat confident in. And then you'll go out with your aerial photography and your provincially mapped hydrology and your compass and GPS, and you'll try to make a trail. And that trail, you'll try your best, but there will be some things that you just won't be able to account for. The amount of information that is on your plate for a decision is immense. So then we have LiDAR, and we've seen lots of this today. One thing that's on this list that was on the last list is the compass and the GPS, because I want to make sure that we're never going to remove people from the ground. Computers make errors, although not much these days, it seems, by everybody's great results. So in comparison, the old provincially mapped hydrology and the new wet area mapped hydrology. And as you can see, if you're trying to pick a route through that area, even with just those two layer differences, you're going to pick a completely different route. I mentioned that there's a whole bunch of metrics and a whole bunch of layers, a whole bunch of information that can get piled on top, and then we have to make a decision. I'm going to add another layer to that. During my master's, one of the most prevalent things that I found when I was out in the Ghost was rutting risk. Ruts were everywhere. This was a dandy location for a rut. It was probably about 20 feet long and went into the woods about 50 feet. To get around that, because you don't know how deep that hole is, so everybody starts making the trail wider and wider and wider and wider and wider. So we need to be able to predict where these sensitive spots of rutting risks are. And so that was one of my tasks, one of the science components of my master's. So now for some boring stuff. I went out with some cool soil physics and soil moisture probes and cores and GPS mapping, and had a good time out in the Ghost on my ATV, driving about 70 kilometers of trails and classifying the severity of the ruts that I was seeing. And with that information, with the soil data, with WAM, with the DEM, I was able to create a rut map. And I'm just touching on this briefly. If you can see, I'm not even going to try. There's a white line with some arrows pointing the direction that I traveled, and you can see inside the white line some colors, and those are the severity ratings of ruts that I encountered along that path. So anywhere that you see that's white inside of there would be a low rut risk, and anywhere that's not is above low. So you start to see that we have another layer all of a sudden. Now we have WAM, we have hydrology, we have all of these different layers, and here's another one. I mentioned that we have all these layers, and then we have that information. Now let's move to knowledge. Let's move to making some decisions on the ground. So with these high resolution products, high resolution results and derivatives, can be attained. There is a little bit of loss when you bring all these together, but that's not really considered inside the tool. So now we need some method to bring it all together. So you need to start asking, so what is the risk of the activity to our values? Our values being the slope stability or stream channel sedimentation. And what is the level of acceptable risk? And that can change. And it can change on the type of trail that you're doing, that you're creating, the type of person that's going to be on there, the type of group that are going to be on there. Are they going to be 18-year-olds? Are they going to be 25-year-olds? Are they going to be whoever? And are there any values out there that you want to promote? Do you want to promote viewscapes? Do you want to promote a nice camping ground? Because we want people out there, but we just need to make sure that trail proliferation does not occur, and that everything done in a manner where the next person that comes behind can still enjoy the same thing. So then it blows up into sort of a mind map here of all the different considerations. So we can have absolute boundaries where we just cannot go by, or limited use zones where we can get close to them but stay away. We have other roads. We don't want to create new roads sometimes, or trails, so let's use existing. Vegetation. You could use LiDAR-derived vegetation to create a view shed almost of saying, I'm going to direct you into places where the vegetation's a little more dense, so you can't see what's around you, which is very valuable sometimes. Then we have our DEM, and then we have my cool science stuff like soils and tire widths and vehicle loads to create the rut map. And then you have aesthetics, which I've sort of touched on, and the different terrain metrics like gradient and slope stability, landscape ruggedness. Ruggedness is one of my favorite layers. I sort of think of ruggedness as sort of the mogul effect. So the more flat something is, the less moguls you have. So you might want to create a trail for an advanced mountain biking group. And so you're going to be looking for these features where they're going to get the mogul effect. Or if you're going to create it for some 4 or 5-year-olds who are learning mountain biking for the first time, you might want to level it out a little bit. So this is where the tool brings all that data together into user sensitivities, and this is where you start to get to play. Now, I created the tool originally in a programming language called VBA, which ArcGIS was so nice to take away from me, because it made this beautiful functional thing, and it's gone. So now all I have is VB.net, and it's just no fun to program in as VBA was. But we see user sensitivities. This is where we get to start playing. And you could build a matrix of all the different possibilities, of all the different layers that you build in. You could, for every single risk for slope, from 0 to 10, you could build a matrix, but the matrix would be massive, and it would take forever to process, and you'd come up with 5,000 routes. It would help in building, so you know where your bottlenecks are, where your very good routes, locations to go. But for the most part, all we do is just tinker. So we start off with one trail, and we say we want a moderately high risk to high slopes, or to wet area crossings. Stream crossings we might want to have up on pretty high, because they cost money to cross and maintain. We can say we want a fairly flat trail, so let's put cutting and filling risk up high. Let's turn down trailblazing, because I don't mind if I have to go out there with chainsaws. Those type of things, and you get to play, and you get to see the results of your playing. So this is just a random example where but you have a dark pink, a white, and a sort of lighter pink on the outside towards me. And you see the dark pink line didn't really care too much about crossing streams, whereas the white line cared a little bit more, but maybe had a little bit higher of a risk to route length, which is also a risk. And then you had another trail where you absolutely had to stay away from wet areas and streams at all costs, unless absolutely necessary, and then it would choose your path. And this was just a simple example. I didn't bring in vegetation or anything like that, but you can quickly see how you can start adding in all these different routes, all these different options, and start seeing what your options are. And instead of going out and ground truthing 50 possible locations that you might want to go, you might say, I'm going to ground truth this one and see which one I like better. So as an output from the trail tool, you get a profile of the trail that is produced. So the top one in this instance is a as proposed. So a company came and they said, we're thinking about putting a trail here. How does that look? So we put the trail into the trail model and ran it through the process. And you can see that there are 2 culvert crossings. The tool also calculates culvert width based on 100-year flood events. And then you see trail 1 at the bottom there, where I started playing with the tool. Let's see how we can improve this. So you see now just 1 trail crossing, or 1 stream crossing, and still the same size culvert. And the grade looks a lot more appealing as well, in my eyes. So then we get a whole bunch of statistics and numbers, and this is just a small sample of the information that is produced. And so you're loaded with information so that you can start doing your trade-off analysis and seeing what am I willing to give up to get something else in return. So as proposed, we had 2 stream crossings. As proposed, had 48 meters of wet area interaction. It was a bit of a shorter route, and it had a lot more steeper slopes. So am I willing to add 600 meters to my trail to reduce the number of stream crossings and reduce the slope length that we're dealing with? And it depends on who you are. It's your call. Maybe you need to get there faster. This is just another example of some of the information that comes across. So I ran 7 trails through the model, and number 7 in this case was the as proposed. And then I tried different tinkerings with the model, and as you can see, WAM interactions, so less than 50 centimeter WAM, we were below every single time. Now the trail length looks like it was a bit of a victim in this instance, but not by much. In some cases, it was even shorter. And we can start seeing the percent reductions in the risk that each trail has, and seeing where the benefits lie. In conclusion, there's a lot of requests for new trails out there on the landscape, and with the sheer amount of people enjoying it and telling their friends that they enjoy it, it's going to become a very big problem if it hasn't already. It's a multifaceted problem space. We need tools to handle all this information. There's too much information, not enough knowledge. So we've developed a tool that does this, and what used to take possibly weeks to months to go through now can take hours to days. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank UNB and Forcorp for letting me come out, and of course the Alberta government. Thank you.